Welcome to the show. We've got Brian Rinaldi and Raymond Camden with us. How you doing, guys?
Great. How are you?
All right.
Doing very good. Just for the sake of full disclosure here, it'd be useful to let the listeners know that Brian and I are actually co-workers now. He works for a company and I work for a company called StepZen. And it's funny, when I was interviewing, I thought Brian was going to be like my boss, but someone seemed to have gotten confused and we're kind of like peers or something. So it's really great. Why don't you tell the listeners just a little bit about like what StepZen is?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so we became colleagues as of what, last week, right?
Yeah, Thursday.
Officially. Yeah. Okay. So it's been a few days. You're already sick of hearing from me, I'm sure. So StepZen, basically, we offer like a way to create one API for all your data sources, so you can connect like REST and databases and whatever other backends your system might have all into one GraphQL API. And we offer a whole bunch of tools for doing that, as well as things to optimize after you created that API. So we're still in private alpha, but you can sign up, get a free access to the private alpha on stepzen.com.
It's always fun to hear, how people describe these kind of like big, high level kind of things. But yeah,
it's not the easiest to describe in many ways, especially when you're talking about data and all that stuff.
But we are not here to talk about StepZen. We're actually here to talk about a book that both of you have written together. So is it the Jamstack Book? Is that the title?
You've got to miss a second introduction of Raymond.
Sorry, I was gonna kind of loop back in with him for the book. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself, Raymond, as well, and where you work and all that.
Yeah, I work at a company called Here Technologies. We're involved in mapping and navigation, essentially a location for developers. I'm a DevRel for them, and routing client-side maps and much more advanced stuff as well.
Great. And how did you guys get together for the book? Have you guys worked together previously in the past?
We have a long history.
Yeah. Our history goes back to, let's see, it has to be 2000, around year 2000 or so, 2000, 2001.
Long time. From the Cold Fusion, Flash, Adobe community.
Yes. So Ray and I have known each other a long time. We actually wrote a book together prior to this that was all about static site generators for O'Reilly it came out around the same time as when the Jamstack term just kind of came around. So we didn't use the term Jamstack at the time. But yeah, so this is kind of a follow-up, but because so much has changed in 4 years, it's basically a wholesale rewrite.
Yeah, that's awesome. And this is something that was one of the things that really got me involved in the Jamstack. So I'm a big history buff myself, and the kind of transition from static sites into the Jamstack is something that I thought was really cool, and kind of as like a newer, dev just coming into this, like way after the term had already been coined, like you kind of had to dig into the history a little bit to like kind of tease it out. But you guys pretty much lived it. And as you can say, you were writing books about this before it was even called Jamstack. So how did you guys feel when the term Jamstack was introduced?
I was not terribly happy with it, but at the same time, like I had given intro to static site development presentations like 200 times, and there was always a significant portion in that kind of talk where you talk about, adding dynamic stuff back in and making sure people knew that they weren't giving stuff up. So I've kind of come around to this new term because it doesn't have the baggage or the assumption that, I have this full app server, I could do anything. If I go static, I could do nothing. Having the term kind of resets expectations and what people think about it.
I understood at the time the need for the term. I quibbled on the actual term, but I didn't have anything better to offer. So I just kind of agreed to, like, okay, I guess I'm not sure I like the word Jamstack, but I don't have any better options.
That's a good attitude to have, because I feel like a lot of people will always complain and then not offer a better solution, and then you're just kind of left with, okay, so you're just gonna complain then. All right, cool. But yeah, no, I like that. If you can't think of something better, get on board. And then how do you guys feel about capitalized jam to lowercase jam, that getting rid of the jam acronym?
So I think we both kind of were unsure of that at the beginning, and I've come around to feel like I actually feel like that is absolutely the right thing to do, because I feel like the acronym is not useful anymore at all, because it causes more confusion than it clarifies, because everybody's like, oh yeah, I do markup and I do, I use APIs and my website uses JavaScript, so I'm doing Jamstack, right? And it's like, well, are you using, any of these tools like static site generator? Are you doing this?
I would say, are you on CDN would be the question I would ask.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't sound like Jamstack. Sounds like just a regular single page application kind of thing. So, and then my secondary quibble with the acronym was I felt like that because it started with JavaScript, we trended towards a feeling that you had to use a JavaScript framework and that it was all JavaScript framework based development. And while I think there are important things that JavaScript frameworks offer and some of these tools, it's not a requirement. And I don't like the
you're
feeling
a long time Hugo user, which is
Hugo, but even Eleventy is JavaScript, but not JavaScript framework, and that's pretty popular too. So like I think I like the diversity of options. You want to use a framework like React or whatever, we've got great options there. You don't want to use a framework, you don't have to. It's not a requirement, but people, because of the J being first, people were like, oh, okay, so I have to use React. It's like, no, you don't. What's your feeling, Ray?
Yeah, there was definitely like a subgroup or whatever that was pushing very hard for like JavaScript everywhere, and like your final result was a JavaScript SPA, and I didn't like that. So anything that moves away from kind of pushing like that being the one true way, I think is good.
It's not what Chris wants to hear. Chris wants JavaScript to be the one true way.
I prefer the term TAM, TypeScript, APIs, and markup. Just
TAM stack, yeah.
Just kidding. Well, it's this thing. It's almost like we're now coming against a full circle. Ryan Florence, who is obviously the creator of React Remix, is saying like, what is the Jamstack? People are asking me if this is Jam, and I have no clue.
Yeah, I saw his tweet, and I think, and I'm not going to quibble with Ryan per se, but I sent him some info on that thread even. I think it's pretty, I think it's pretty clear what it is. I think if you start thinking, how can I put this nicely? I mean, I felt like there was maybe some effort to just kind of dismiss it. It was I felt his tweet was a little dismissive of Jamstack in general. I think a lot of people sent him info about what it was, and I don't know Ryan at all. So I felt like he was a little dismissive of even that. So it's like, okay, I think we clearly define, we know what it is. We all talk about it. And I mean, it's like this static first kind of way of building things, right? That distinguishes it from a standard single page application, right? Like it's mostly static. We can do server-side rendering on some frameworks, but for the most part, we're going to stick to static, right? There's certain tools that help us achieve that, and then we deploy on places where it's all like CDN based and things like that. I mean, I think all those pieces come together to make something that is legitimately different than other types of web development. I agree with him that sometimes our definition gets muddled, and so it can be hard for somebody outside to understand what it is. But I do feel like we do have a clear distinction.
Yeah, I was also following along with that tweet thread, and I responded as well to it. I got the sense that he feels that it's become an overloaded word, which I think is something that we probably agree with here, and that's part of why we've been like, honing the terminology exactly. And he's just constantly getting asked by people like, is Remix Jamstack? Can I use Remix with the Jamstack? Like, there's all this kind of like, because the thing people are constantly talking about, so he's constantly being asked about it. And he's like, I don't have anything to do with the Jamstack. Like, I didn't make this as the Jamstack. I don't pay attention to the Jamstack. He doesn't want to have anything to do with the Jamstack. So he's just like, I think he's frustrated that it's like the thing, and people keep trying to force that thing onto his thing. And I think that that's totally valid. What I did take issue with is he was saying Jamstack has all these problems Jamstack people don't talk about in terms of things like persistence and auth. And he was saying all this stuff gets fixed by magical API fairies. That's what I really took issue with. And that's why I felt the need to send like long tweet messages responding to it, because us here in the FSJam community have built this entire community specifically around addressing those issues that you're bringing up. So to say that we don't know about or that we're not addressing it, I think it's just fundamentally dishonest to like the work that we're doing.
I've been doing static sites since like 2013, but I feel like as a thing, we're still very, very, very young. And like any new thing, in the beginning, you're super excited and you love this new way of doing things. And absolutely, sometimes you oversell, sometimes you gloss over issues. But like I was very big into serverless when it first came out, and there was the same reaction. Every time you would mention serverless, somebody would be like, "Oh, but there's a server involved." That guy, and it was always a guy. So I feel like we're probably hitting some of that with Jamstack becoming so big and so popular. There's going to be negative reactions to it, and whatever. Like I'll get crap done while you complain about the name.
Yeah, I think we can, as you know, Anthony, we can refine the definition. I think that's where even I struggled with some of the ways that we were kind of that JAM acronym, right? I felt like it encompassed too much. And then it becomes easy for somebody to say, well, everything is Jamstack, right? I mean, that's Jamstack. And we'd have arguments even in some of the communities. And I'm like, no, we need to be clear about what this is that's distinct from something else. Otherwise, we fall into that trap of it doesn't mean anything and having it be a fair criticism at that point.
One of the things I think Jamstack does do very well is for beginners. Say if you've never touched web development before, picking up a Gatsby website, for example, can be a really easy way to get something on the internet. For someone who's doing their first HTML, for example, even though it's not HTML, it's JSX.
Absolutely. I mean, well, Gatsby, I think, in particular, is been a popular entry point, partly because it does address a lot of those issues, even though it is React, and like if you don't know React, it can be kind of complex, but because they have the built-in tooling, and particularly their plugin ecosystem, makes it really, really easy to be like, oh, I just want to use this service. Let me find and then they have a plugin. It's like, boom, okay, done. And I don't really need to get into the details of how that works. So it's really good for onboarding. I also feel like some of the more traditional static site generator tools, like a Jekyll or a Hugo or Eleventy, that do just purely static site generation, are actually really, really easy for people to get started with without layering in. If you don't know React or you don't know Vue, because we have a lot of Vue tools, or even there's now an Angular tool in Scully. If you don't know any of those frameworks and you just want to learn and get something on the web, I really feel like those tools are actually a super easy experience to get started. Granted,
I'd like to get into Eleventy actually, because Eleventy I think is kind of what a lot of your book is using. Is that correct?
No, one chapter, right?
Yeah,
just one chapter. Okay, yeah, I guess that's I shouldn't say most of the book. I only got the first 4 chapters, so I have a bad sense of the whole book, I should say. Yeah. But that's the chapter that introduces static site generators.
Yes.
There we go.
That's Ray. Ray. If we're talking Eleventy, you should be talking to Ray.
Great. Yeah, no, I'm actually learning Eleventy right now because we're using it with this group called lunch.dev, which is kind of a spin-off of the React podcast Discord server, which is funny because we're not using React at all, but we're kind of building out like a events calendar using Eleventy. So I've been learning it. I've been learning how to do how pass data around, and there's actually it's a really, really powerful static site generator I'm actually finding. So I love to hear kind of what you enjoy about it, kind of how you would describe it to people who have never used it before.
I came from Jekyll. Now, I liked Jekyll a lot, but I hated to install Ruby on new machines, especially on Windows. It was doable, and it's gotten better since I first started using Jekyll. But Eleventy, just being NPM based, was enough to get me to look at it. And being able to use JavaScript to customize stuff was also a big plus. I think the issue I've run into certain other generators that I won't name is that some of them are very prescriptive in terms of what you're allowed to do. And if you want to go outside of that box, you have to work hard. The generator I used before Jekyll, that again, I won't name, I literally wanted to output a JSON file. And it took a week of me fighting against a system that did not want me to do JSON, HTML or nothing at all. So I feel like Eleventy doesn't care. I want to output a .ray file. It will let me output whatever I want. It doesn't hold my hands. It's very flexible. I love the fact that it has multiple engines involved with it. So coming from Jekyll, I love that I could use Liquid. But every now and then I'll have something where Liquid's not a good fit, and I just slap in EJS. And EJS is ugly as hell, but it gets the job done sometimes. So I think it really comes down to flexibility and not being trapped, if that makes sense.
In my experience, the JavaScript static site generators, the thing that I like about them is that they benefit from the ease of integrating external APIs. The other traditional static site generators don't often have an easy way to, like, say, consume an API and then spit out a bunch of pages or content from that API at build time. So that's something that I feel like Eleventy does really well, but also like Next and Gatsby both make it really easy to just say, oh, here's this REST API that I'm consuming, or GraphQL on StepSend, and then just pull that data in and like spit out pages from it or something like that, right? Hugo can do a certain degree of that, and I think it's possible with Jekyll. I've never really been able to do it, but it's not necessarily super easy. Whereas on all those tools, it really is.
I think I came into the Jamstack at an interesting time where Create a React App was the popular one, and Gatsby was just past its 2.0. And obviously, I started creating something with Create a React App, and then was like, oh, but it kind of needs to be static. So I went to Gatsby, and I've never actually looked at any other static generator apart from Gatsby and Next. But at the time, I wouldn't have classed Next as a static site generator. Even now,
No.
I still wouldn't.
I would say it can do it, but that's a subset of what it could do. I would say that Next is capable of static site generation, but it's not a tool that's designed to just do that. So there's probably other things. Like Eleventy, I feel like is really optimizing to be just a static site generator. Like, actually, that's a good question. Raymond, can you do SSR with Eleventy?
I have not looked into that at
No.
all. I've only
I don't
used
think. Yeah, I would definitely say that I would not expect it to. I would not think it would, and so that's why I say I don't think of Next as just a static site generator. I think of it as like this kind of multi-purpose tool that includes static site generation as one of the things it can do. That's kind of how I think of like Next and how it relates to Gatsby. But I have a pretty similar story to Chris, actually, in terms of I started with, I learned React, create a React app, going through like my boot camp, and then kind of found Gatsby. Actually, I found Gatsby before my boot camp, but because of how it works, you can just fire up a blank project and start writing Markdown. You actually don't need to write a single line of React to get a Gatsby blog set up on the internet and then just write Markdown. So that was why it ended up being a really good entry point for me, is that it generated the site for you. You didn't have to actually figure out how to do any of the React internals or even the GraphQL internals. Like, I never looked at a single GraphQL query in my Gatsby project. I'm sure they're buried in there somewhere, because I was always told Gatsby was using GraphQL, but I had no idea what any of that was doing. And then I started looking into the history, and I tried Jekyll, like, just to kind of get my hands on it. And then I've also played a little bit with like Eleventy, and I like Nuxt. Nuxt is kind of like Next in the sense that it can do static site generation, even though it's not just a static site generator. As we've been saying, there's like so many tools, there's so many things involved here. So I'd like to kind of get into some of the other tech that you guys have written about in the book, and how did you go about choosing the technology to use in the book?
The first half of the book covers mostly like tools like static site generators, but we picked use cases, and we tried to kind of come up with like, what would be, if I was doing X, what would be the tool I'd want to use, so that we could give you like a broad view of the different tools that are available. What we wanted to do is, like, say, rather than come out and be prescriptive and be like, okay, this is going to be about building Jamstack sites, but everything uses Gatsby or Next or whatever. We want to give you all a range of options so you can see what tools fit for you, number one. And number two, to think about that certain tools are often better for certain use cases. The documentation one, I use Hugo because I think it's actually particularly for large documentation sites, and the fast generation is great. It's got some great themes for documentation and stuff. So it's really a good tool for documentation. Whereas like on the e-commerce side, I'm using Next because I felt like, well, e-commerce has lots of dynamic elements going on that actually benefit from the way that React renders the UI. Whereas a tool like Hugo may not be, I've used Hugo for e-commerce stuff, but like it may not be as good a fit depending on what you're trying to do.
I looked through the first 3 chapters of the basic is with Eleventy, the blog is with Jekyll, and the documentation the CMS website is with Hugo. I think that's a really good approach because this isn't a book about Jamstack. Oh, really? It's just Gatsby. It's trying to teach the core principles that is shared across all of these projects to really define what it is. What is Jamstack? Well, what you're teaching is, in essence, what it is without labeling it to a framework.
Yeah, I was very worried because I have such a visceral reaction to some of these static site generators. Like some I love, some I hate. So for the book, I wanted to be really sure where, like, if you go into the Eleventy chapter and you hate what you see, the next chapter gives you a different example of how to build something. So, we try to make sure people know that they have a lot of different options and there's something there that will meet your style.
Yeah, and we try even in some of those chapters to like go through what here's some other options. This is not the only option for this use case. And like if you look at the documentation chapter, for instance, I'm like, there are static site generators just for it. There are other tools that can work. When we talk about headless CMS, it's like, here's different options and here's why I'm choosing this one, just to kind of continuously give you the whole range of tools you can choose, because that's part of the fun of Jamstack is it's not prescriptive. I can do things the way I want to do them. Like I can create a developer experience that fits my style, but we need to give you all of the kind of the range of options that are available to you so you can evaluate them.
And then later on in the book, do you get to things like React and Vue and some of those based frameworks, or do you not use any sort of like React or Vue framework?
No, we use Next.js. I cover in the e-commerce.
Gotcha.
So you've swapped it away from Gatsby.
I did swap it away from Gatsby.
That's really interesting because I've built a e-commerce website with Gatsby and Shopify. We also added a CMS where Shopify wasn't good enough. And then our whole build structure was merging 2 different sources of data into one. And then Gatsby parsing that data and then displaying it to the end user. I don't know if that could be redone in Next easy. With Next, it's a completely different way of thinking about it, as you're not thinking a builder that is building, it's more generated page by page.
One of the key differences with Next is it doesn't have that plugin ecosystem. You have to build that stuff yourself. Whereas I might integrate with an e-commerce system via just a plugin that they have on Gatsby. In this case, I would have to kind of code it. There were various reasons why I ended up choosing Next. And honestly, it's a personal preference thing. I've used Gatsby a bunch before and it's a great tool. I kind of prefer Next myself for a variety of reasons. So I kind of say, okay, well, I'm going to choose a React one, and I swapped out for Next just because that's the one I like better. And nothing against Gatsby. It's just like we said, each tool has its own style, and it's really what do you like, and find the tool that fits you.
And then on tooling, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to talk about one of the next chapters that I don't know if you've wrote yet or yet to write, and that was Serverless, chapter 8 of Serverless.
That's Ray.
That is Ray.
Yeah, that's you, right, Ray?
Okay.
I just finished 7 yesterday. I haven't started 8 yet.
Okay, so we can talk philosophy here. Would you say that we are stretching what Jam is when you add in your own APIs?
Yeah, sure. And I'm okay with that. That's fine. That's fine. I mean, again, being in development for a long time, what makes me so happy about Jamstack is it gives me a great, stable option, a very powerful option. So stretching it's fine. Like I come back to this. I hate to be constrained. I like to have an escape hatch where 90% of my code base is perfect, but I need some crap code for like 5% or whatever. I need to break the rules. Being able to break the rules when I need to is fine. I'm all about the philosophy of great development, but there's also the practical world where we have to get things done. I like having that option.
I think the key is, like we talked about earlier, it's static first, but and I think even in modern tools like a Next, it's static first, but not static only. This is the thing I keep saying. It's like, we try to do everything static as much as that we can pre-render. We pre-render where we need to integrate like APIs and things like that happen on the client side, then we do that. The definition is changing a little bit because of tools like Next, and I think others will follow suit. Like Nuxt, for instance, now is, as far as I understand it, you can do static site generation or server-side rendering, but you cannot do both together. But I imagine I would hazard a guess that Nuxt will be able to allow you to switch that based on root soon too, as well as maybe Gatsby and other things. But if you look at what's going on in Next underneath the covers, right? And the reason you can still deploy that to Netlify is it's just serverless functions. It's not like it's there's no node-based runtime going on there in terms of like when you deploy it to Netlify. It's still deploying to the CDNs, but it automatically creates serverless functions for you to run that server-side stuff. So, I mean, the definition is we need to kind of make it clear enough that it's distinct, as we discussed earlier, but allow for like, we're just trying to solve a problem. Like in the end, you're trying to build a website and you need it to do X or Y. And if you need to have server-side rendering to do that piece of the app, so that's, hey, cool, do it. But we try and pre-render as much as we can. That's kind of the key point.
The reason I bring all this up is because of new, as we would call them, FS Jam frameworks, full stack Jam frameworks, such as Blitz, Redwood, Bison. These are currently 3 projects. 2 out of the 3 sit on top of Next, but Redwood has gone their own route. What we would define them as is basically Jamstack with a database included, authorization included, a way to generate code as templates included, and it kind of feels like its own area forming where it's kind of like, if you just want to, plug in other people's APIs, well, Gatsby or something would be great. But if you want to start building an application or something deeper, that's where this new area is forming. And it is tool agnostic to a certain point, because Blitz are doing really well based upon Next, and Redwood is doing really well based upon nothing else, just by themselves. So it's this thing of like, when we define what Redwood is, it's like, this is Jamstack, but it's also not, because it's doing loads of other things that is not typical with Gatsby or Next.
I'd argue that's, yes and no. I think it has a lot of the tools built in to do that stuff, but these are things we were doing. I've done auth on even the CFE.dev site that I run, that has auth, and that's all Hugo. It's just some of these pieces where you were often, when you were building a complex Jamstack application, all of these pieces you had to kind of build and orchestrate yourself. And I feel like what these tools do is just give you a way to not have to do all of those pieces yourself. So, a lot of people were connecting to databases, right? Like Fauna has been kind of popular among Jamstack developers, for instance, as a database, it's quote unquote backend for Jamstack applications, right? They were already doing this, but they had to kind of build it themselves and set up the orchestration within the application themselves. And I feel like what Redwood does is just say, hey, you know what? All that stuff is complex. It's really hard for a developer to kind of manage all these pieces. And so we're just going to give you tools to just make it easier to do the things you're already trying to do. And you may not need every one of the tools on the list of things that Redwood provides. You probably won't, right? You may need just a few, but we're going to make it really easy to do that stuff right out of the box.
Are there any other important tools that we haven't hit on that you want to get into before we kind of move on to other topics?
Nope.
Those are all the important ones. Great. Awesome. I'd really love to know how you both think about the audience you're writing for in terms of difficulty level, prior experience? How do you approach that? Who do you think the book is aimed at?
I could see someone brand new to the development being part of the audience. I came into Jamstack coming from an app server background, and so to me, I could also see that being as maybe someone doing .NET, doing PHP, looking for a simpler solution as well. So I would say anyone in web development at any stage who's looking for a new way to get stuff done.
Yeah, I'd say, each of the chapters kind of written almost as like a complete, particularly the first ones that are like, oh, build the documentation, build e-commerce, build, are written almost as a complete end-to-end, like I finish a project by the end of that. Other than general web development experience, it's like I don't write them assuming any other prior knowledge. You don't have to have used the Jamstack before. Even the Next.js chapter, I don't assume you necessarily know React. So I don't dig deep into React concepts, but I will show you how you can actually get the job done in Next without even necessarily having to understand all of those pieces. Yeah, I think it's really for anybody with some web development experience would be beneficial. I don't even know if that's necessarily required, but probably would help.
When do you expect the book to be fully finished?
Tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. Did Manning pay you to ask us that? No, we just turned in. I think Ray's finishing another chapter, and I finished chapter 5. So we basically, that would get us through the second third of the book, and the last third I think is due in like another month or so. I don't know the exact timing of it.
I've got one more left. That's all I know.
But I will tell you that you can get access now. That thankfully they have their early access program. So like if you want access to the chapters as they're being written, you can get them. So if you were to get the book now, you'll get the next batch of chapters, which will be coming out shortly, very soon.
Manning have provided a discount code for the book. I can't remember how much it is. I should have revised this. Do you have it, Anthony? We're still new to this.
Yeah, you're never supposed to ask.
You can always ask. No, it's fine. And I think the last
it's
guy.
Like, what's Everfund going to be finished, Chris?
Everfund's finished. It's just not fully working.
We're finished. We're just not done.
That's
it. Exactly. You mentioned it about you can pre-read the book before it's finished. Mm-hmm. That was what I was trying to allude to. That
we've got a discount code for you guys. It's a 35% discount code at PodFSJam21, and we'll have a link for that in the description in the show notes.
I'm still waiting for the purple mattress. I can't wait to get a free mattress.
Cool. Just to open it up to both of you, is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Other projects that you're working on that you're excited about, or things you wanna get out into the world?
I mean, the only thing I'd love to share is I do run these bi-monthly virtual meetups on cfe.dev on a whole range of topics. I mean, we have a lot of Jamstack ones, so if you're interested in Jamstack, but a lot of general web development and just a range of topics. So they're all free. So just go to cfe.dev and you can join those.
And the only thing I would throw out there is if anyone's hiring for DevRel, I know some people who are looking, some very top-notch people. So feel free to reach out to me and I could connect you.
Thank you for the time that you gave us today. It's always interesting to take things back to the most basics, as you are doing with a book about teaching, the essence of Jamstack. And I really did enjoy reading the first 3 chapters.
Thanks. Yeah, the Essence of Jamstack. I think that's like a new clone by the Essence of Jamstack.
Yeah. Is that the subtitle of the book?
Don't worry, I'm already pitching it to O'Reilly. Essence of Jamstack.
Does it have a subtitle, or is it just the Jamstack book, like the entire title?
It is the Jamstack book. I don't know. I don't think it has a subtitle. It's like,
Yeah, one of
I think it says the Jamstack book. Brian's chapters are better than Ray's, I think is what it says.
Yeah. Whatever, dude.
Well, there is comments about what people say, so I expect to see on there the essence of Jamstack, Chris Burns.
Okay, I'll look for it, and then I'm sure the Manning will contact us and be like, we need to use this.
Maybe that's the follow-up.
Yeah, they'll give you royalties for it.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
You're welcome.